Welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm going to introduce our two speakers and then invite you to introduce yourselves a bit further. Really, the plan for today's conversation is to hear from Dr. David Robinson and Carol Leibel, our CEO, to give us a little bit of the context of climate and severe weather, some of the ways of thinking about these issues as an investor, as a scientist, opportunities for leverage and action, and really thinking about how can we each engage in creating the world we want to live in to thrive as a global society. So first, Dr. David Robinson is a distinguished professor in the Department of Geography at Rutgers University and also serves as New Jersey State climatologist. He earned a doctorate in earth sciences at Columbia University before coming to Rutgers. Dave's research interests are in applied climate, especially related to New Jersey, and in climate dynamics and change, particularly focused on global snow cover. He is a contributor to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Cryosphere chapter and to national climate assessments. He has sat on climate advisory committees for the National Academy of Sciences and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Dr. Robinson is past president of the American Association of State Climatologists, has received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Association of Geographers, and is a fellow of American Meteorological Society. Thank you so much for the work you've done to address the climate crisis and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Read Carol's bio briefly, and then we'll turn to your own introductions. So Carol Leibel is the Chief Executive Officer of Domini Impact Investments. She has over 25 years of impact investing experience. She's responsible for the overall research and mutual fund operations of the firm, and she leads many important initiatives and oversees all of our work and leadership. And in particular, has developed a forest systems lens project that has been really pivotal and instrumental in advancing the field of impact investing into systems of investing. So Carol and Dave, I'll invite you to each just put your work in context a little bit for tonight's conversation, starting with you.
There's always something interesting going on with the weather and climate, and that's what's made my career so interesting. I'm a Jersey guy, grew up in Bergen County. I hiked Jockey Hollow as a Boy Scout, ending up in the square here or whatever. So I was born and raised on it, and I've had a fascination, as many meteorologists and climatologists, since childhood, just how it all works. The excitement of what's going on out there, and trying to, as an educator, I come from a family of educators, to help with the understanding. That's kind of my key word, to help people understand what's going on, and not just hearsay out there or whatever. I always say you're somewhat entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. So hopefully I can clarify, answer some questions, and we can converse about that this evening as it relates to Jersey or elsewhere, and how we can have a more sustainable planet as a result.
At Domini, we have one set of standards. We think of them as a brand, but more importantly, we apply them to all of our mutual funds because we believe it's how all investing should be done. And we're looking to set a model and put information out there for the financial markets to follow. It is different in the world of finance to have a woman-led organization. So our founder was a woman, and myself as our CEO, but also our general counsel, our director of research. And what we find is that where you have clusters of diversity, more grows. So to have a mutual fund that has two women as portfolio managers is, I can assure you, very unique in the world of finance. But it's been fascinating. Through the years, we've really watched the growth of the sustainable investing industry. And we like to believe that we have helped spark that growth and continue to provide, in effect, a public good for those in the financial markets to follow.
Diversity. The climate system is so diverse. You can come at it from so many different directions, which I think makes it fascinating. And it opens opportunities for anyone to really get into the game, if you will. I mean, it's all powered by the sun. And then we start talking about the spheres of influence, the biosphere, the hydrosphere, anything water on a planet, the lithosphere, I mean, what's that? Well, a volcano erupts that can affect the climate. And then we have my favorite, my research, the cryosphere, which is anything frozen, sea ice, glacial ice, snow cover. And then front and center in this day and age is humankind. We're not called a sphere, but there we are with our factories, with our deforestation, our croplands, our vehicles going throughout. So all of these are part of a system, and a system has no real beginning or end, and you can pull out the different parts of it, but you can only go so far looking at one part without having to turn to the others. So it is incredibly complex. But as I said, it opens opportunities for biologists, chemists, physicists, computer programmers, and so on, just to get into the science of it. And of course, it's such a topical issue. There's so much interesting going on for the good and for the bad, that we bring in societal sides of things. That's the beauty of being in a geography program, where we really look at the nexus between humans and society, the impacts that the natural system puts on society, and in turn, the impacts of society on natural systems. And that's what makes it such an interesting and timely discipline of it. This past year has been a surprise, even for climatologists. It's off the charts, what we've seen. The oceans have had like 15 consecutive months of above average ocean temperatures. You may have heard that in context of the potential of an active hurricane season this year, because the oceans are so warm, and that's the fuel for these storms. So even though we knew the basics of what was going to happen, there's still surprises out there that have really perplexed. We have a number of floating ideas of why this past year got so out of control. Part of it's natural, and that's what makes it so challenging too. There was a modest to major El Nino event in the tropical Pacific, and we know that tends to take heat from the oceans and put it into the atmosphere when you have an El Nino. But that can't account for all of it. But we've seen each successive major El Nino combined with human-induced warming to set a new global temperature record in 83 and 98 in 2016 and now in 2023. So we keep the natural events continue to occur, but they're occurring on a higher base level, if you will, a higher foundation provided by you and I and our impacts on the environment. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot still to happen. And there's things we can do in terms of fighting it, if you will, addressing it. And some of it does get down to investments and how we proceed with that.
Protecting the planet is core to our impact investing goals, as Mary Beth said. And we often say they're twin goals of ecological sustainability and universal human dignity, because there's so much intersectionality there. You cannot disentangle them, right? So when we reflect on climate change, it's our greatest existential threat. So it has to be considered.
There used to be two schools out there. You had the weather, and then you had your climate, and they were far apart, and the climate was the average of weather, whatever. There's been a movement, if you will, over the last decade or two, and I'm proud I was a part of that on the National Academies of Sciences Board of Atmospheric Sciences and Climate. We recognized this schism, and we saw that the Europeans were doing it a little differently when they were putting the two together. So you don't have to exclude one from the other. By confronting extremes and how to handle extremes today, a Sandy, a major heat wave and such, you're simultaneously preparing for these occurrences in the future. So you're killing two birds with one stone in a sense. So you're preparing for the extremes now, and with the knowledge you gain and for how you address those extremes now, you're better prepared down the road. Now, down the road, those extremes may happen more often, and you'll have to subsequently evaluate how to proceed. But there should should be no schism between them, and they should naturally support one another. And I think that encourages more people, even those who may be somewhat skeptical about the human influences on the climate system, certainly recognize the extremes that are coming. So maybe that's a way in the side door to get them convinced. I don't think we need to do that as much now as we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's been a challenge as a climatologist over the decades, hearing what you hear. I think there's a little bit more unanimity on that today, but there's still a lot of discourse and disagreement on how we approach it. And I'm perfectly fine saying, okay, approach it from the extremes end, because I know it's going to be better in the long run, and vice versa as well. So,
can you talk a little bit about what New Jersey has experienced, what we should be preparing for, and then like with that equity lens, sort of how do different communities experience what's been happening here?
Yeah, good point there. We're getting warmer. All our seasons are getting warmer in New Jersey. We're having more persistent warmth as opposed to necessarily record. We haven't set a lot of daily high temperature records. We may this week, but it's not that. It's just the persistence of the warmth, the longer summer season. We're seeing it more in warmer nights. As the atmosphere has more of these greenhouse gases, it's harder for the daytime heat to escape out to space at night. So we're warming our nights faster than we're warming our days. So we're dealing with that on the temperature side. We're seeing more explosive precipitation events. I like to say when it rains, it pours. We've had the Floyd, the Irene, the Idas. A warmer atmosphere, an atmosphere that warms by 1 degree Celsius, has the potential of holding 7% more water vapor than a degree cooler atmosphere. Doesn't mean it's going to be there, but it has the potential. So when you get a trigger to get that moisture out of the atmosphere, there's more of it available to come out of the atmosphere. So we've seen those extreme events. And then we have to deal with storms, coastal nor'easters or tropical systems. And the concern there is that with warmer sea surface temperatures to provide fuel for these storms, they can be more powerful further north. Sandy was a stronger storm than it would have been had sea surface temperatures in October of 2012 been normal. They were above normal, so Sandy stayed a stronger storm further up the coast. It still would have occurred. It still would have made that crazy left turn into Jersey, but models, post-mortem, if you will, models suggest that it wouldn't have been as strong. And then finally, I'll go with the fourth one, sea level. We're a coastal state. Our whole mentality is set up, our culture, our identity as being coastal, a coastal state, and sea levels are rising. That makes a strong storm that much worse because you're working on a higher base. You're working on a 12 to 18 inch higher base than had this storm occurred a century ago. Projections are 1 to 2 feet more sea level rise by mid-century, and probably 3 feet more later in the century. And with that, more challenges when storms come along, and even this fair weather or sunny day flooding you hear about, where with a full moon, you have some of these low-lying roadways being flooded. And the frequency of them has been increasing in Miami Beach, in Norfolk, in Atlantic City. And we're going to see that continue too. Even on nice days, you're going to see some flooding. So those are the issues, what I say, temperature, sea level rise, storminess, with that potential flooding and the heat.
We've really been incorporating this intersectionality of these changes and how diversity, equity, inclusion, justice all needs to come into play in addressing these. So I'll start off, and Mary Beth can probably even give us some examples of some of her work, but our forest work is focused on that. So one of the things, when we first started out, so our forest project is a system level investing project where you really can't disentangle some of these smaller issues. You have to think about the whole issue. So when we were thinking about deforestation, we decided to focus on forests. And of course, when we first started out, we were thinking about intact forests. And through the years of our work, we realized, these urban green spaces are really important, just in terms of, cooling and then, carbon sinks and moisture. And so we've been focusing on 6 different types of forest or green lands, as we call them, to help address that. But when we're doing our work in engagement and we're talking to companies about any one of these issues, we're always looking to overlay a racial equity lens, and to wherever we can bring in effect, not making the same mistakes that some of the old industries made. So when we're working with solar cell manufacturing, the materials, it can be toxic, and even just who they have working in the factories and green jobs, we're engaging with them on how are you thinking about this in a racial equity point of view. How are you making sure you're not dumping these hazardous chemicals in locations in low-income areas, as well as how are you retooling the workforce to make these green jobs available to those most in need.